Hello, this is Dr. Dave Maslag talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3, and in this particular video, I want to talk about research methods you should avoid with your PhD. So if you don't know, I'm actually a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I try to be as helpful as I possibly can. So the whole genesis behind the Reciprocity Project, it started out as this kind of sharing economy proofreading platform, but then I decided I can actually give more of myself. I want to create sort of a system or a platform that allows people to share and be open, and this is one of my ways of just giving of myself, because I think that there's some amazing people out there and they can really use some of this information. So what are some research methods that you should avoid with your PhD? The first one is any sort of research method that will take a lot longer to execute than you think that it's going to take, right? So if you're thinking that this particular thing that you're pursuing, this research method you're pursuing, is going to take you like 5 years, that's probably a bad thing that you should pursue with a PhD. If you are pursuing a PhD, you should be aiming at a research method that's probably going to take less than a year. If you're thinking it's going to take you less than a year, it's probably going to take you 1 to 2 years. So there's kind of a rule within research, and a lot of people don't really get this until they're sort of immersed in it, and then they start kind of figuring it out. But whatever you think is going to take you, it's called the planning fallacy, by the way. This is kind of a common psychological thing that happens. But whatever takes you, whatever thing, if you think it's going to take you a couple of months, it's probably going to take you 3 to 4 times that. And if you just kind of get used to that particular rule, that okay, I think it's going to take me a month or 2 to finish this thing, it's probably going to take you 6 months to do that. So if you think it's going to take you 1 year, it's probably going to take you 5 years to finish that particular thing. So you should be aiming for something that is, realistically, you should be aiming for something that is going to take you, that you personally think it's going to take you, 6 months, but realistically, it's probably going to take you 1 to 2 years, because that's going to allow you to sort of move forward and get through your PhD. And if you have a good advisor, they're going to help you sort of direct you with that particular direction, right? And give you a PhD or help you get a PhD within a couple of years within 4 to 5, 6, 7 years, which is sort of a reasonable amount for a PhD. The second thing that's important when you choose your research methods, and ones that you should avoid, is make sure you do not pursue a research method that is too expensive, so it's outside of your particular budget, right? So there are some amazing research methods out there that you can pursue, and you could purchase software, for example, that can do some really amazing things. You can also create your own software, which is part of what the whole Reciprocity Project is about. You can watch that. You can watch some of the older videos, but you can also, you can go and do a massive sort of experiment in a community, for example, some large thing. And all of that stuff is crazy expensive, and you will forget how expensive it is. So you just even purchase your own software, for example, it's going to be tens of thousands of dollars, likely. So you're going to have to, there's two ways that you can actually sort of deal with this particular issue. You can go get a research grant. And there's usually sort of minor research grants that you can get for some software, right, in a major U.S. school. And in some of the major schools across Europe and whatnot, they'll allow you to get some sort of grant. And that are relatively easy to get for, maybe it's $10,000 or $5,000. They're relatively easy, but they are still going to take up a lot of time, and they depend on a lot of different factors. So you can fill out this grant and do all this work, and then nothing's going to happen from it. Anything that's going to cost you, over $5,000, it's probably not worth your time as a PhD student, unless writing grants is part of what you are part of the program that you're doing. So there's lots of fields where this is sort of the main thing that you're doing, and then you should probably get exercise doing that. And then what ends up happening with grant writing is once you win a few, you start getting more and more and more, right? Because it builds up trust. trust, and the different granting agencies can see that you can actually do that particular thing and execute on that particular thing. So you have to worry about pursuing research methods that are going to be far too out of reach for what you're doing in terms of the expense. So it should be, if I was you and you were thinking about research methods, I would choose research methods that are relatively in line what you can afford right now. And anything that's beyond that, it's great, but it's going to take a lot of work, and it depends on a lot of different factors, and it's just very high risk strategy when you're pursuing that. You could be very creative, think like an entrepreneur. If you're thinking about research methods, really truly think like an entrepreneur. Where can you get sort of cheap samples or cheap data? Stuff that you can actually do it very cheaply, and you will be surprised in what you can get. There's lots of data available right now, and there's more coming online. There is lots of sort of cheap sources for you to actually collect data. Even the fact of a few years ago, we used to, for space research and whatnot, it would have been very expensive to do some of these programs. But now you might be able to piggyback with a company that's doing CubeSats, for example, that are the small little tiny satellites that you can send into space, and you might be able to piggyback on that. So just look for things like that you just be very, very entrepreneurial. And you could probably save yourself a ton of money with a research method. A third thing that you should be very interested, or that you should worry about with research methods, or ones that you should avoid, is ones that you are thinking, this is going to be a quick win. You have to think about the research method that you're learning is going to take you a decade, if not. Because what's going to happen is you are just barely learning how this thing works when you do your PhD. It's not until you've been doing it for years after that. And what ends up happening, so you build a core competency. So in business, we talk about this thing called the core competency. And that is something that you're pretty good at, right? And you can sort of show that you're pretty good at, and it's an advantage over somebody else that does that same sort of exercise. There's another thing that's sort of a symptom, and it's just basically because of specialization that happens. You get a core rigidity. So the thing you get good at is the thing that you get really focused on, and then it makes it hard to switch to something else. So imagine whatever you're doing, whatever you're choosing, is probably a 10-year endeavor, which is not a bad thing, but you just should be well aware of that thing that you're choosing to do. So whatever research methodology, if you're going to do an interview, for example, and get really good at interviewing, if you're going to do ethnographies, you're probably going to pursue that for a long time. You're not going to kind of go in and out of that particular thing, and just kind of get practice with that sort of idea with the thing that you're doing. A third thing, or a fourth thing, I guess, is choosing research methods that are relatively controversial for the time. So you want to be choosing a research method that is relatively, it's at the cutting edge, and it is unique and different, but at the same time, it is not going to lead you to a tremendous amount of controversy. So some of you in the social sciences, for example, might have heard about the Stanford prison experiments, right? By Zimbardo and Maslach, which actually, by the way, is my last name. They were doing some, they were involved in the Stanford prison experiments, which were, at the time, turned out to be very, very controversial. But actually, when they were executing them, they weren't controversial. But Phil Zimbardo, realized that it wasn't really a good thing to do. And the same with the Milgram experiments, right? With this sort of fake shocking, people didn't realize that was necessarily a controversial thing. Now, extremely controversial to do any of that kind of stuff. So you just, at the time, you have to worry about what is controversial and what not. And if you are in this day and age, if you're doing sort of like the fake shocks that were going on with Milgram experiments, it'd be really hard for you to get a job unless that there was something amazingly novel and unique. It's just that, people shy away from anything that's very controversial. They don't want to be, especially in this day and age, with being very sensitive to, you just don't want to do anything that's going to harm anybody in any sort of way. So you have to be, you just have to be you have to be well aware of those particular issues, right, of going forward before you pursue that thing. And sometimes it does really matter in what you're doing. And and not to say that anybody's doing that kind of research at this moment, just disregard what I said in any sort of way. I'm not sort of knocking that kind of research, but you just have to be careful with it and how you frame that particular research. And you just have to be very, very careful. The fifth thing is you have to believe in research methods that you truly do believe in. So if you're pursuing research methods that you don't buy into the fundamental idea of what it is, right? So for example, you're somebody that you're highly trained in qualitative methods and you understand qualitative methods. Well, it wouldn't make any sense for you to start doing regressions and looking at secondary data because if you are trained in that particular method, you probably have a lot of not very good faith in the sort of quantitative methods, right? Because it seems like, it's just numbers and you're not really actually getting into what is truly going on. You're not really getting into the mechanisms. And the same goes if you're kind of a quantitative person, you're running regressions and you're looking at that kind of stuff. You can have a lot of self-doubt or you can have a lot of doubt in survey methods because it is you're just asking for people's opinions, for example, which tend to be, people have all sorts of crazy opinions, but when push comes to shove, their revealed preferences are the thing that's important. So you just have to be very careful with what you're doing, and you have to be sort of buy into that because that's the thing that you're going to be doing going forward. So you don't want to be doing anything that is, you fundamentally can't buy into one research method or another. So you can do it for a short while, but then you're probably not going to get convinced with that, and you're probably going to want to do and switch something to something else. Which is, by the way, as an academic or as a professor, that's what you do. You're constantly switching to different research methods and stuff like that. But when you're getting into a PhD, it's probably better to do something that you're comfortable with going forward with research methods or whatever it is. Qualitative or, quantitative or experimental research or quasi-experiment, whatever it is, that you have to decide that you're buying into this particular thing going forward. So with that, hopefully you like this video. Give me a thumbs up if you do appreciate it. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel. I try to put out as much useful things as I possibly can for people that are thinking of doing research or doing a PhD. That's what the whole Reciprocity project is all about, it was solving my own problem with my own writing. And I wanted to allow other people to, get access to this sort of problem solving thing. So it's a sharing economy proofreading platform where if you exchange sort of peer feedback for other people, it's absolutely free. And I also want to incentivize people to join this platform if they were, especially if they wanted to help out other people and didn't sort of believe in that. So you can actually get paid. You can convert those credits into money eventually. So that's all I want to talk about. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.